Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 8th of February 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, it was a dark and stormy night. The wind is still howling around the city of Plymouth, and reports that we've got in say that's much the case across the rest of UK. And I believe that the wind is also whipping across the lowlands of Holland. Isle of Man sunny, they claim, Mike, but I can't imagine it's calm.
Can't last.
Can't last. And apparently we've got more high winds on the way. That's led to an announcement about cranes, which we'll come to in a minute. Where should we go? Lib Dems, not a bad start, Mike, I think.
Well, specifically Tim Farron, because he is up the ante on the unaccompanied refugee children from Syria. He is holding an urgent summit, according to this article on Liberal Democrat Voice, to discuss unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who have fled conflict, poverty, persecution, and that will be chaired by Tim Farron. And it says that Tim recognises that accepting these children will have an impact on public services and will require authorities, charities, and central government to work together to mitigate these challenges. So the roundtable seeks to explore best working practices and establish how central government can act to support local authorities, both financially and from an operational and logistical standpoint. So he said the government's response so far has been not only pathetic, but I'd actually call it callous. They, on one hand, say they're helping people while making sure headlines scream, "No children can come here." The Prime Minister, with these types of actions, demeans his office and hurts our country. The Prime Minister's cold-hearted vision of Britain is not mine, and it's not the vast majority of the public's either. I hope that by bringing all partner organisations and other MPs of all parties who share my commitment on the issue together to lay out a more positive plan to help those unaccompanied children in Europe who have been down in doorways night after night, thousands of miles away from home. So I just wanted to remind everybody of this little challenge that we put out last week, and I just do wonder whether this in fact is a response to some of the public, and I thank everybody that wrote to Tim Farron already on this, and I do wonder whether this is a response to that. But nonetheless, let's keep the pressure on, because in that little article that I put on my Facebook page, I'm pointing out how many children disappear within the care system in this country, and out of the frying pan into the fire was the phrase that sprung to mind. So I don't want to see any children coming to this country if there's no guarantee of them being looked after properly. And I don't want to see children coming to this country if, in fact, by the fact that they've come into this country, they end up in being trafficked and in being sexually exploited. And so I was suggesting in that article and in the comments I made last week that Tim Farron should take personal responsibility for the children that come here. Perhaps he
will.
So, but let's keep the pressure on.
I think there's also something else going on here, Mike. I think this is the whole business of Syria and refugees and the children. The children is the distractor, so that we've got the government now talking about the children. This keeps the heat off domestic policy and politics in this country. And of course, it takes the heat off Parliament, which we're going to be coming on to in just a minute. Cynical. I don't think it's anything to do with looking after Syrian children. I think this is a political scam.
Okay, well, wanted to highlight Dr. Rola Hallam. Now, if we go back to 2013 or so, the time of the first vote in Parliament on whether or not to bomb Syria, the BBC ran a documentary called Saving Syria's Children, and they timed it very nicely for that vote, although it didn't have quite the outcome they'd hoped, I suspect. And as soon as we saw it, we were calling it out as a scam and said so on the news programme at the time. Now, the documentary followed Dr. Rola Hallam and an alleged napalm attack on a school. And the story was so full of holes, really, that it was laughable. So Patrick Henningsen and I did a lot of research on this, and we came to certain conclusions. Now, just before Christmas, I spoke to a guy called Robert Stewart, who independently from us had been doing the same research and had come to the same conclusions, and he has been working hard to expose the BBC ever since on this. So this is his website. fabrication in BBC Panorama, Saving Syria's Children. So we reported last week that Robert had recently discovered for himself that the BBC, of course, is not subject to Freedom of Information Act with regard to editorial matters. But this report from him today or yesterday is something else, because what he had done was he had applied to the charity, or he had reported Hand in Hand in Syria, which was the charity that was at the back of this Saving Syria's Children documentary. He had reported them to the Charity Commission because of what he sees, and I would agree with him, as having significant political agenda behind their work. And so what he says in this article is that the Charity Commission has determined that a complaint about the UK registered charity Hand in Hand for Syria, drawing attention to issues including the posting on Facebook by Hand in Hand in Syria's co-founder and chairman Fadi Sahul of the slogan, "We will bring Assad to justice no matter what lives it takes, no matter how much catastrophe it makes." The Charity Commission said this does not raise sufficient concern or represent a significant or ongoing risk in relation to the charity that would warrant or justify regulatory action at this time. So read this article. In fact, have a look at this website for yourselves, because much of the evidence is there. But towards the end of this article, Robert points out that he had also made mention of Dr. Rola Hallam's father, Dr. Musa al-Kurdi, and the fact that he is involved politically with the Syrian National Council. And the Charity Commission said that it does not consider, irrespective of whether or not it's true, that this either proves or demonstrates a risk that the charity is operating for a political purpose, or that any undue political influence is or has been placed on the charity. It concludes that it does not consider that it would be reasonable or proportionate to further pursue the specific issues raised within this complaint. But they do say, "We will, however, engage with the trustees of the charity to provide some general advice and guidance in relation to some of the wider issues that the complaint has raised." So there you go. Charity Commission not really doing much investigation of themselves.
Well, they don't like doing that, Mike.
No.
So it's another one where complaints seem to go round in a circle. But isn't it interesting? We've got this aspect of BBC coverage of Syria, and we can come back again and say, what role did BBC's charity Media Action have out in Syria? Because we can ask now, was it BBC Media Action reporting staff who helped put together this story? No way of knowing.
So just to close this off then, I'd like to highlight this event happening in Frome at 7:30 on the 1st of March. This is Robert Stewart will be presenting his evidence on Saving Syria's Children. I'd like to encourage everybody that can possibly go to this to go to it and support Robert, because his work is brilliant, and this story needs to get broader coverage. So do have a look at that. There's the Facebook event details on the right-hand side of that slide. Okay.
Okay, well, where can we go now? Syrian children a distraction, at least that's what I think. Have a look at what Parliament is now starting to do. This is Chris Grayling, who is gently wheedling in the fact that MPs who are arrested, their names are going to remain secret. So here we are, MPs to use Human Rights Act to claim anonymity if arrested by the police. And Chris Grayling is putting this forward. Look at the eyes, I think, in this photograph. Might we say, would you trust this man? I don't think I would. What are they doing? Well, the motion has to be passed by the MPs themselves, but the comment in the Telegraph is it could be nodded through without a vote if no one objects during a debate on Wednesday after Prime Minister's questions. And under the proposals, MPs' identities will be kept secret if the arrests relate to their private life. But their names will be published if the offence relates to their work as an MP. Well, if you're elected as an MP and you commit an offence, it must relate to your standing as an MP. Or have I missed something complex there?
No.
Okay, so what seems to be happening is that post Britain and Janner, we've got Westminster effectively battening down the hatches, and they're closing down the police paedophile investigations at the same time. So MPs now drifting into a world of secrecy if they're charged with something that somebody decides doesn't affect their role as an MP.
But if you're if you're a civil servant or a member of the police service or fire service and you commit a criminal act, or you're accused of a criminal act, you're naturally entitled to be considered innocent until proven guilty. However, you tend to be suspended at the very least until such times as the any kind of criminal procedure is concluded.
Well, this is true, but MPs are supposed to be special people. If they're anywhere near the House, if they're sitting in the House, if they're involved in debates, then of course you're relying on them being squeaky clean. Well, that used to be the case. Thanks to Red Hand, we had some sort of simple analysis on this. That essentially this will prevent the electors coming to know of their own MPs actually committed crimes, and what are the constitutional implications if it applies to the Lords. This will allow dissent MPs to be disappeared. Now, I think this is a very important comment, because on one hand we could attack all of the MPs saying, well, you're just hiding the criminals amongst you. But of course, what it allows is any MP who turns out to be a bit of a problem can be fitted up very easily and just disappeared because nobody will know. Perhaps this is a good way for them to get rid of the MPs who've actually spoken out on child abuse, Mike. We got the proposal here by Grayling. This is the same man who wanted to stop prisoners being able to read. We're still not sure why he did that. This seems to have been undone, but it gives us some glimpse into the mind of this man. And also we are told it's an implicit overturning of the Wilson Doctrine, whereby the House of Commons would always be informed if any of its members were under investigation. Okay, there's a narrow meaning of the doctrine if they're under surveillance, but again, there's another question to be asked here. And this one I thought was significant. It seems to be a convergence with the continental press practice referring to any person on remand or serving a sentence or following their release from a sentence as John and then just the initial of the surname. So again, people who've been in the system for crimes kept secret if you're in a position of power. And this was the other thing. We've reached the stage in our historical nadir of ignorance that we've forgotten the 5 members of Parliament that King Charles I attempted to arrest. And you might like to go into Parliament, you might like to do your own research on that and just see. So this seems to be something that once again is being slipped through in the background. To my mind, it's making Westminster more secretive, but we're told, well, no, this is just to align things with general human rights. So please research that and make up your own minds.
Just before we move on, a reminder that Ian Crane is not in the studio tonight, so no programmes this evening. He'll be back live next Monday at 7:30 as usual.
Yeah.
Okay, EU referendum. Well, it goes on. Now the Brexit is going to bring the jungle to southern England, according to David Cameron. And he's warning that Britain will be vulnerable to terror attacks. Migrant camps are going to spring up across the southeast of England if we leave the European Union. So we've got to be pretty scared about all that. Glad to say, though, that Theresa May has now indicated she will join the Remain campaign, because apparently the campaign to stay in is called the Remain campaign. Excellent. So that's good that she's joined that. But you know, they're really ramping up the panic because, of course, the French, if we leave, will not want the British border service to be on the other side of the channel. We'll have to move that back to Britain, and apparently that's going to cause you know, hundreds of thousands of new asylum seekers to come into the country. We're going to have to set up prison camps for them, which is all quite ironic because today David Cameron is also outlining his new plans for reform of prisons. and he has set out a vision for a truly 21st century prison system, according to this press release here. And he's calling for prison reform to be one of the great progressive causes of British politics. Who does he want to put in prison? So much that David Cameron himself is getting involved in prison reform.
Dissenters, Mike, is the answer.
Indeed.
Those who dissent against any view or policy put forward by David Cameron's government.
Indeed. So there are going to be 6 new reform prisons created this year, and the prison governors are going to have full autonomy over their budgets. So that's a precursor to privatisation, perhaps?
Privatisation, and of course you won't get medical treatment because medical treatment is expensive and will come out of the prison budget. So
right.
Just as with Melanie Shaw, you simply don't get treated.
But it's really good because the control of the budget will include control of the prison's education system, and apparently they're going to set up league tables just as we have for schools. We're going to have prisons league tables so that if prisoners leave the prison and then reoffend, that's going to count against the prison. So prisoners are going to have their minds changed while they're in prison and educated for when they leave prison.
And of course, we know that Common Purpose has been operating in prisons for years, presumably selecting prisoners to be future leaders. So Hull Prison was one of the interesting ones where, of course, they tried to hide how much money the prison had actually spent on Common Purpose training. But an interesting one. Political charity active in prisons. Well, who don't we want to trust? We definitely don't want to trust David Cameron. And we thought this was a good time to remind people of some of the information that the column has put out before, back to March 2010. And the headline here, Cameron's constituents rebel. And the front page here is a poster that was saying, "We will not vote for you, Mr. Cameron." And this was remarkable, and it was produced in his own Witney constituency. It caused huge angst for Mr. Cameron and the Conservative Party at the time. But what it demonstrated was that in David Cameron's own constituency, people had had enough of his duplicity, and they were also showing deep concern over the fact that he did not want to give any form of referendum over the European Union. This was just one of the piece of text from that article. It said, in an unprecedented show of disgust and mistrust in David Cameron as Tory leader and local MP, voters in Witney have distributed the leaflet opposite thousands of homes in Cameron's own constituency. The small leaflet makes clear that Cameron's betrayal of voters over a referendum on Europe has not been forgotten. No EU referendum equals no vote for Cameron in the forthcoming elections. So back in 2010, we get some insight into the fact that his heartland supporters, Mike, absolutely convinced that Cameron had lied and betrayed them over Europe. And that, of course, is just what's happening over the present referendum. But let's have a look at Witney in a bit more detail, because this is a story that's been buried by time. This was Witney Conservative Party chairman, Christopher Shale, and he produced a report on the Conservative Party, utterly damning, and the next thing he's discovered dead in a Glastonbury portable toilet. And his reports contained this: over the years, we, the Conservatives, have come across as a graceless, voracious, crass, always on the take party. That is, now he made that public, that report that he put into the Conservative Party because he was asked to do it, was actually leaked and made public on the 25th of June 2011. And that night he was found dead in the Glastonbury toilet. Now, in that Mail article, it says the pathologist was unable to confirm the cause of death. So there was quite a bit in the press at the time, but we can now look back and ask some questions. Here's the Guardian report, and now all of a sudden Christopher Shale died at Glastonbury of natural causes, the coroner reports. Well, the coroner, Tony Williams, ruled that his death had been caused by heart disease and he had no drugs or drink in his system. He was, in fact, his death was clearly as a result of natural causes.
Is this is this the same kind of heart disease as John Smith and Robin Cook?
Well, this is exactly what I'm asking, but there's the key bit there. We've got a pathologist unable to confirm the cause of death. Well, if it was a heart attack, it would be pretty easy to establish the cause of death. But we got a coroner saying his death was clearly the result of natural causes. So something pretty suspicious going on there. If we look at it, just bring in this again. Thank you very much to the person who said, take a look at this website, Intrepid Report. And there was an article on July the 14th, 2011 by Wayne Madsen, which we had not seen before. And I'd encourage everybody to go and have a look at this article. This is just one paragraph. It says, we've been informed that Shell's suspected disloyalty to the Tories resulted in worries at number 10 Downing Street that the long-time friend of and advisor to Cameron might have decided to talk about a Tory scandal dating from the late 1980s and early 1990s. Cameron visited South Africa in 1989 on a trip financed by the South African armaments company Armscor. It was the same year that South Africa began dismantling its nuclear weapons program. Now, according to this article, it says that basically nuclear weapons from South Africa went missing. It implicates, according to this article, the Tory party and Mr. Cameron for being there. But the other name involved in this is David Kelly, because he was one of the scientific advisors on the basically dismantling of the South African nuclear
deterrent. Was it
project?
Yeah,
we'll
right,
call it
okay.
the project. So we will say to people, please go and have a look at this yourself. But as you say, Mike, it's all just a coincidence, isn't it? David Kelly dies, John Smith dies, and now we've got this Conservative Party gentleman dying as well. We've got at the bottom of the screen here, there's a web address for Intrepid Report into the archives, number 2499, and you can actually have a look at what they're saying there. But something very dark and dirty in the middle of the Conservative Party. Well, if that was going on in the political level, one of the things that we've consistently been warning of is the dismantling of Britain's military infrastructure. And we'd like to thank the person that just highlighted this gentleman to us. We're not saying he's personally done anything wrong, but it's the significance of what he and other senior British military officers are doing, which is of interest. So here we've got Lieutenant General A.D. Leakey, CMG, CBE, and this man was Director General of the European Union Military Staff in Brussels on the 28th February 2007. So posed by the EU flag, we can clearly see here that there's a full-blown European military structure being built. And of course, British senior officers are being drawn into this. The person pointed out to us that many senior Royal Navy officers have also fulfilled EU military posts in recent years, and now they're promoted even further up the ranks to determine the existing military policy. Let's remember that it was David Cameron that, without any debate in Parliament at all, set up a 50-year defence pact with the French. And what we can see is that British military is being dismantled from within, and the military command and control structure is simply being taken over by the EU. And the other thing that's going on hand in hand with this is, of course, global corporations are now taking over military infrastructure, which means, for example, with the Royal Navy, we don't have the ability to actually deal with significant breakdown on the ships because there's no qualified engineers to actually do the job. So subversion at best, treason at worst, but this is all going on under our noses. And we'll just remind people again, this becomes more and more significant. Back in 2009, we were warning the EU is to take control of the UK's military. And here we were on the case of Trident and saying that the policy will be to dismantle Britain's independent nuclear deterrent, which we believe under Cameron's policy will be handed to the French. So Britain will not be allowed to have strategic nuclear weapons. That nuclear control and the capability itself will be handed to the French. And I'll just end this section by saying thank you very much to Mr. Barmby, who pointed out to us a few days ago that the British, highly successful British Black Arrow rocket programme was remarkably scrapped within a month of Conservative MP Ted Heath being elected. And he made the decision on the Monday after he'd been having talks over the weekend with the French on entry into the common market. And the view of Mr. Barmby is that we were told if you want to get into the European economic community, you're going to have to scrap that rocket program because it was outstripping the French and the other European programs. It's dirty stuff, Mike.
Yeah. Okay, finance. So Liam Halligan has published this article, "The World Economy is Shaking and Funny Money Won't Fix It." The reasons behind recent stomach-churning falls in global markets are many and varied, he says. He starts off by saying, so that was jarring January. Since the start of the year, over £4 trillion has been wiped off the value of global equities. That's 4 followed by 12 zeros. US stocks endured a steeper first week decline in 2016 than any other year since the First World War. Stocks are down 2% again today. And Halligan goes on to say, while policymakers maintain that the fundamentals are sound, many large investors now think otherwise. We're getting caught in the dreaded negative feedback loop when market turbulence brings about the very economic slowdown it fears, with investor anxiety itself becoming the catalyst for a renewed slump. And he goes on to discuss the many and varied reasons for the problems as he describes them, including the slowdown in the US service economy. He says, I maintain that the financial volatility will prove so destabilizing and cause such damage to America's economy that we'll see more US quantitative easing and perhaps even a reversal of December's rate increase. Talking about interest rates there, rather than placating the markets that could do more harm than good. Back in 1985, the world's leading powers came together in a New York hotel and negotiated the Plaza Accord, because he had gone on to talk about China and so on at this point. He says this saw central banks join together to steadily depreciate an overvalued dollar, which threatened to cause an outbreak of protectionism in the US. We need something similar but different today. What we need is Plaza 2 to support the Chinese yuan and prevent the dollar from strengthening more. We won't diffuse QE or prevent further falls in global stocks, but it could be a start. Well, I would suggest that no, that would not be much of a start. A start would be dealing with the banks, splitting them up. Blaming real economies and real nations is a diversion. And so let's look at this one, because the only journalist that's ever really mentions the Bank for International Settlements, which, to remind everybody, is the central bank for central banks, is Ambrose Evans Pritchard. And he is talking about Jim Karuna, who's the general manager of the Bank for International Settlements, who's warning that we're living under an illusion of sustainability, that this has blinded borrowers and debtors, has lulled them into a false sense of security, and that really it's all turning, and that the financial cycle can be quite abrupt, apparently. So he's warning of a financial crash. That's the Bank for International Settlements, which really should know more than anybody what's coming, is warning of a financial crash. He talked about the carry trade, which was set up in 2008, really. And Evans Pritchard remarks that what looked like a one-way bet at the time has proved to be a Faustian pact. Now that the Fed is turning off the spigot, we may be approaching the eye of the storm. And he goes on to say the temptation might be to try to keep the financial boom going, or to give them a new lease of life. but this will just be palliative unless the stock of debt is adjusted. So this is Karuna talking again. So he's really talking about the levels of debt that are going on, and I think we would be wise to take the warning on board. But of course, our glorious leaders won't bother. I had to laugh at this one. Also in the Telegraph, scrap £50 notes to prevent financial crime, urges ex-bank bosses. Peter Sands, the former chief executive of Standard Chartered, and he's an advisor to the government. So clearly good advice coming from him. He's saying eliminating €500, $100, 1,000 Swiss franc and £50 notes would remove the type of currency which is used by fraudsters. He also said that while cash is still useful for smaller transactions, such as buying coffee, most people prefer to make larger payments electronically. He said high denomination notes are arguably an anachronism in a modern economy, given the availability and effectiveness of electronic payment alternatives. They play little role in the functioning of the legitimate economy, yet a crucial role in the underground economy. The irony is they are provided to The irony is that they are provided to criminals by the state. Ask people in the United Kingdom when they last used a £50 note, the highest sterling denomination, and the most common answer is to pay a builder or a plumber. The incentive is tax evasion, since payment in cash makes it easier for the individual to avoid VAT of 20%, and if the builder pays his workers in cash, he in turn avoids employment taxes and they avoid income tax. So he reckons that the irony is that £50 notes are provided to criminals by the state. I reckon the irony is that the state continues to permit the real fraud here, which of course is all based on electronic systems and not based on cash at all. So here we are. I'm just highlighting one article here of hundreds of never-ending newspaper headlines describing the fines for this or that fraudulent action by this or that fraudulent banker. And,
but the bankers never pay the fines, do they, Mike? The company pays the fine.
That's absolutely right. And of course, the fines are never paid in £50 notes either. They're paid in electronically, so it's all funny money. So let's not put these guys in prison. Let's just maybe perhaps we should do is switch off their terminals. But certainly, getting rid of £50 notes isn't the answer.
And Cameron and George Osborne have said, go carefully on these guys because they're not bad people. They're not bad people. Maybe they just need re-educating. Well, on a serious note, a very serious note, obviously financial collapse is a serious note, but right in the heart of our society at the moment, this lady, unbelievably dangerous and becoming more and more powerful. We continue to warn about the spying empire which Theresa May builds. This was one of our previous articles. The butterfly, because of course she likes to be turned out in her best clothes, but she is stripping away very important liberties and rights. The article included a knock on the door, 3 people, and sectioned in minutes how the state is stripping our liberty by stealth. And we keep saying why the public needs to understand the dangers of the multi-agency public protection system, MAPA. Now, how can we reinforce this? Well, we're going to thank the person that sent us some very, very interesting documents showing how somebody can be put in the MAPA system. So this is a referral document. Basically, we'll just say to you that the subject has been victimised, harassed and threatened and bullied by the local police for years. Now they're making a MAPA referral for this particular person. So there's a claim that the subject has a mental health issue, and that, of course, is the opinion of an unqualified police officer. But we were fascinated with this little bit up here because it's referred to the CSA coordinator. We'll come on to that in a minute. But then it says open liquid logic. And on the right-hand side, opposite that, it actually says that the person is not on liquid logic. Well, we were intrigued by this. We had no idea what it meant, but we've done some research. before we hop on to that, we'll bring you down here. It says mental health appears to be deteriorating, further medical investigation required. That is a statement by a totally unqualified person, one who we would say has malice towards the member of the public concerned. So on it goes. Here's the multi-agency safeguarding vulnerable adult referral form. It sounds good, but of course it's highly dangerous. A lot of information, where you live, who you're connected with, who your principal carer is, and on it goes. So that we want to know who significant family members are. We want to know the referrer details. The reason for the referral, which, as we've just said, is completely cooked up. Possible mental health issues means that the person concerned is now in the middle of a horrific data collection exercise. So on it goes, on to the next form. And here we've got the start of the other agencies. So once you're into the MAPA system, you don't exist as a private individual anymore. Every part of your life now coming under scrutiny and shared around a number of agencies. The end of the document here, for what it's worth, agencies to whom this form has been sent. Now, this is not something coming into post. This is already in existence. Let's go into it a bit deeper, because here's Liquid Logic, and this is effectively a very capable IT company producing database systems which will cover every aspect of your life. So here they are linked through to this very big company, System C, which claims that it's harmonising care across hospitals, social services, maternity services, treatment centres and the community. And they boast on this website of how many hospitals they've gone into and how much of the NHS is now databased within their systems. So that is itself connected with this one. Now we're getting into the meat of it, because this, of course, is the privatisation of healthcare hand in glove with data collection on a breathtaking scale. So that company linked into Shearwater Healthcare Investments, and they're about making profit from your care. Well, what's the core of this? This is the truly frightening bit, because here's the Liverpool Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, MASH. These are some of the people that will now be collecting information on the subject of that MAPA request that we've shown you. All of these people together in one place and totally unaccountable to the victim or to the public as a whole. Well, this is what it really is, a team within Liverpool City Council. So, Mike, I don't know how we can explain this to people to show how dangerous it is, but essentially now every aspect of your life open to scrutiny by anybody in the local council as the result of one community police officer claiming that you're mentally ill.
So we have frontline health services ending up in chaos. We have junior doctors having their contracts messed about with. They're being forced to strike effectively. And in the background, we've got millions, if not billions of pounds being spent building this massive big data infrastructure, which has got nothing whatever to do with healthcare and everything to do with the big state.
This is to do with the state able just to pinpoint you, make an accusation, no factual evidence, no background, you are mentally ill, you must be because you're a dissident, and then all of your private and personal details are shared with a whole range of organisations. Well, we just had a look at one of the articles on this in the Liverpool Express, new service to assess safeguarding referrals. And the Mayor of Liverpool, who just happens to be a former social worker, said the aim is for the service to expand to deal with cases involving vulnerable adults and establishing links with wider safeguarding arrangements, including domestic abuse, child sexual exploitation, and look at the last one, violent extremism. So this now totally dovetails with the PREVENT strategy. The government says you dare to challenge what we say about countries overseas, then you are a potential terrorist. Now you can be put straight onto the MAPA system. And then it also says the purpose of MASH is to gather intelligence and share information across different organisations to enable a more accurate assessment of risk and need to inform the most appropriate response. That is a licence to spy on everybody at the drop of a hat, just because somebody in Liverpool City Council says so. And on it goes. The multi-agency safeguarding hub MASH sees children's social workers and staff from Merseyside Police, NHS Liverpool, Liverpool Community Care Group, I think that is, the National Probation Service, Merseyside Community Rehabilitation, Liverpool Housing Providers. There's your house provider. The house provider is involved in spying on you, and housing, all co-located and working together inside Liverpool City Council. This ought to be the most explosive information coming out across UK at the moment, that in 2016, under the hand of David Cameron, we now have Stasi Britain in operation. It's a stage where I don't know what else to say, Mike. This is so significant. We will try and bring you some more information on that MAPA report. The person in question, of course, has had their children taken from them, and since that date have been harassed, threatened and bullied by the local authority, hence the reason, the need to brand them as mentally ill, because they're effectively challenging the state. We better finish there, I think.
Yeah.
Well, just before we go, I'd like to say thank you very much to the person who sent me this brand new book. It's called Mapping the Millennium, Behind the Plans of the New World Order, by Terry Boardman. And I was told that this was a particularly good book. So thank you for sending it to me. I will read it. Any other announcements? Friday
and Monday we won't be doing a UK column news because we're intending to move the studio at that point to the new location. So we're taking a couple of days off just to give us the extra time to sort of get it all sorted out.
Okay, we will at the right time give you more information, of course, on that studio move. We think you will see the difference, and it's only been possible with your help and the help of a special person who was very kind to us before Christmas. So if you know who you are, thank you very much, and we've done our best with the donation. Thank you very much. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.